All right, so TikTok, am I right? It's been a wild ride.
It really has.
Yeah, a total roller coaster with this whole ban thing, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've got like this crazy situation going on where both President Biden on his way out and then President-elect Trump coming in, they're all getting involved, and then the Supreme Court is weighing in. So what we're going to try to do today is break down what we know based on these articles that we pulled, just to try to paint a picture for everybody of what's happening with TikTok, right?
It's just so fascinating how this is all playing out, isn't it? I mean, we're seeing this clash between national security concerns, freedom of speech, and then like all these millions of users wondering what's going to happen to their favorite app. And and then the businesses, right? All those creators and companies, their livelihoods depend on this thing. It's a lot to untangle.
It really is. So, okay, let's start with like the core of all of this. Like what exactly is in this law, this ban that's causing all this commotion?
So, essentially, the law is saying that TikTok can't operate here in the U.S. unless its parent company, which is ByteDance, the Chinese company, sells it.
Oh, okay.
And the biggest worry, like the root of it all, is data. The concern is that the way TikTok collects data could pose a risk to national security.
Okay, so like could the Chinese government be accessing that data?
Yeah, potentially. Or even manipulating what people see, like the content itself. The U.S. government's worried about that kind of influence.
So it's not just general data privacy concerns then, like it really comes down to who specifically might have access to that data, right?
Right, exactly. And it's, the whole thing is just really complicated by all the tension between the U.S. and China, right? There's this like inherent distrust, and that makes this whole situation different from like general worries about data collection by American companies.
And TikTok, they're not just like taking this lying down, are they? They've been pushing back, haven't they?
Oh yeah, for sure. They've been saying all along that the U.S. government hasn't shown them any real proof to back up these claims. But despite TikTok's objections, the whole issue ended up going to the Supreme Court.
And the Supreme Court just like dropped this major decision, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. It was unanimous too. The entire court upheld the ban. Even Justice Gorsuch, in his opinion, said that he used the word dramatic.
Wow. So even he is saying that this is kind of unprecedented. So how did TikTok react when the ruling came down?
Oh, they immediately went into panic mode.
Yeah.
They're talking about potential shutdown, and they're pleading with the Biden administration like, hey, we need some clarity here. Like, what's the plan? And they even released this pretty strong statement saying that unless the Biden administration basically steps in and assures these, what are they called, service providers?
Service providers.
Yeah, that they won't be held responsible for hosting TikTok, that the app's going to go dark this Sunday.
Wait, back up a second. Service providers, who are those exactly? And why are they suddenly so worried about all this?
Right, sorry. So service providers are basically the companies that make it possible for you to use TikTok, right? That includes app stores like Apple and Google, plus all the internet hosting companies that, keep the app up and running. The problem is, if they keep offering TikTok after this ban, kicks in, they could be hit with huge fines. It's a big risk for them.
Got it. So TikTok is basically using this threat of shutting down, right? To pressure the Biden administration to act.
Pretty much, yeah. They're trying to force their hand.
And the Biden administration, they're not exactly jumping at the chance to deal with all of this, are they?
Not really, no.
Yeah.
They've basically said that it's up to the incoming Trump administration to figure out how to actually, enforce this law.
Passing the buck a bit?
Yeah, you could say that.
So how did TikTok take that? Not well, I'm guessing?
Not really, no. They were pretty public about how unhappy they were.
Yeah.
And then the White House went on to call TikTok's warning a stunt and basically said there's no reason for them to do anything before Monday.
Oh, okay. So lots of tension between TikTok and the Biden administration. But now we've got President-elect Trump coming in and saying that he actually wants to negotiate this whole thing, right?
Yep, that's right. And here's the interesting part. He actually supported the ban initially. And now he's changed his tune and wants to find some other solution.
Well, that's a plot twist. What do you think is going on there?
It's hard to say for sure. I mean, maybe he's thinking about the millions of TikTok users who would be affected.
Yeah.
A lot of those people are probably his supporters too. Or maybe it's more about him, wanting to look like the guy who gets things done, the deal maker.
Yeah, that's possible. So he could use this to boost his image. So right now, we don't really know what's motivating him.
No, not for sure.
But this is like a whole other layer to this already complicated situation.
It really is. And it's easy to get caught up in the politics of it all, but we can't forget about all the real people who are going to be affected by what happens next.
That's a good point. The articles we've been looking at, they talk about people like Desiree Hill. She owns a mechanic shop down in Georgia, and she's built up this big following on TikTok, and now she's worried she might lose her business if the app goes away. And then you've got people like Senator Rand Paul. He actually joined TikTok as a protest, saying this ban is like an attack on free speech.
Yeah, and then you've got all the everyday users who are just caught in the middle.
Right.
I mean, imagine how stressful it is not knowing if the app you use all the time will be there tomorrow. It's just total chaos and confusion. And now you've got this last-minute trend popping up where people are sharing secrets and like frantically downloading videos because they're worried it might all disappear. There was even like a false alarm on Saturday evening where people thought the app was shutting down.
Yikes.
It just goes to show you this isn't just some abstract political debate.
Yeah.
It's having a real impact on people's lives.
So just to summarize, we have this ban, then we had the Supreme Court upholding it, then we have the Biden administration basically saying, not our problem, and then you have Trump coming in saying, I'll fix it, but we don't know how. And in the middle of all of this are these millions of people whose lives are being turned upside down.
Exactly. And it raises some really big questions about the role these platforms play in our lives and how we balance things like national security and freedom of expression. But before we get into those questions, I think it's important to take a step back and look at who all the key players are in this whole saga.
Okay, yeah, good idea. Let's map this out a little bit. So you've got ByteDance, the parent company, and they're really digging in their heels about not selling TikTok, even with all this pressure from both the US and China, right?
Yeah, they're not budging. They see TikTok as this like gold mine, and they don't want to let it go. But that hasn't stopped some big-time investors from sniffing around just waiting to pounce if ByteDance does have a change of heart.
Yeah, the articles mentioned Steven Mnuchin, remember him? Trump's former Treasury Secretary.
Yeah, he's interested. And then there's Frank McCourt, the billionaire. Apparently, he's putting together a whole group of investors to make a bid. And then, get this, there's even a bid from Perplexity AI. The AI search engine.
Oh, wow, yeah. To like merge with TikTok.
Yeah, a merger. It's kind of crazy, right? I mean, you could see how merging with an AI company might help with some of those national security concerns. Maybe you shift control of the algorithm and the data away from ByteDance and put it with a U.S. company. That might ease some anxieties about China having access.
I see. But then wouldn't that create like a whole new set of concerns? We'd be talking about this powerful AI basically running a platform that millions of people use every single day.
Right. Yeah. That's the thing. It might solve one problem, but create a whole bunch of new ones. Like, what does it even mean to have an AI making decisions about what we see, how our data gets used, how the platform changes over time? Those are big questions, and we haven't really figured out how to deal with them as a society yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it seems like we're trading one problem for another. We get rid of worries about foreign governments, but then we've got this whole AI thing to worry about.
And that just goes to show how complicated all of this is.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, no magic bullet that solves everything. We're dealing with all these different values clashing, political pressure, economic interests, technology that's changing so fast. It's messy.
It really is. So, okay, if selling TikTok either to investors or merging with Perplexity isn't the ideal solution, what else is out there?
Well, that's where the government comes in, right? This whole TikTok situation has just like reignited this huge debate about how to regulate social media. Like, how do we balance national security, freedom of speech, and the power of these tech giants?
Right, it's like walking a tightrope. So some lawmakers are pushing for stricter data privacy laws, right? And not just for TikTok, but for all social media companies.
Exactly. They're saying we need clearer rules about what kind of data companies can collect, how they can use it, who can see it, the whole 9 yards.
That makes sense. And there's also been talk about creating like a new regulatory body, right? Something that would specifically focus on social media platforms.
Yeah, that's another idea that's been floated. This new body could monitor data practices, investigate breaches, make sure companies are actually following the rules. It's like we need someone watching the watchers, basically.
It does feel like we're in uncharted territory here, doesn't it? Like the digital world is changing so quickly and our laws and regulations just can't keep up.
That's a great observation. The old ways of regulating things, the stuff we use for other industries, it might not work for social media. It's too new, too different. We need to be creative, think outside the box, and figure out a new approach.
And as we're thinking about all these potential solutions, the sale, the merger, more regulations, we have to remember the human impact, right? There are millions of people who use TikTok, and their lives are going to be directly affected by whatever decision gets made.
Oh, absolutely. We can't lose sight of that. It's not just about legal principles and corporate strategies. We're talking about real people's livelihoods, their creativity, the communities they built online, their sense of connection.
It's easy to forget that when you're talking about these big companies and government decisions. And it's also important to remember that this whole thing with TikTok, it has implications beyond TikTok itself, right? It could change how governments approach regulating all social media platforms, not just this one.
You got it. It's a precedent. What happens with TikTok could impact Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of them. And it raises these huge questions about how much power governments should have over the internet, about online freedom of expression, about data privacy in the digital age.
Yeah, it's a lot to think about. As we're talking about all this, I keep coming back to the idea of data and how it's at the heart of so many of the concerns around TikTok. It feels like we're really only beginning to understand how important data privacy and security are going to be going forward.
That's a really key insight. We're in the middle of this data revolution, and we're still figuring out the rules as we go. We can't just think of data as information anymore. It's connected to power, to who we are, even to national security.
So how do we deal with all of that? How do we protect our data? How do we make smart choices about the platforms we use? It feels overwhelming.
It's a good question, and one we should definitely spend some time on. But first, we have to acknowledge that this whole TikTok situation is still up in the air. We don't know what's going to happen.
Nope. We're all waiting to see what President-elect Trump does when he takes office on Monday. It'll be interesting to see if he pushes for a sale, negotiates an extension, or comes up with something totally different. Whatever he decides, it's going to be a big moment for TikTok and maybe even for the future of the internet as a whole.
It will be. And as this story unfolds, it's important for all of us to stay informed, to ask questions, and to be part of the conversation about what the digital world should look like.
Before we start talking about all the potential solutions, I'd love to hear what some of your initial thoughts are after processing all of this information. What really stands out to you?
I think what really hits home for me is just how much power these social media platforms have. We're talking about an app that's woven into the fabric of millions of people's lives. The thought of it just disappearing, whether it's because of a government ban or because the company decides to shut it down, it's kind of scary.
It's a wake-up call, right? These platforms, they're fun, they connect us, some people even make a living from them, but they're also operating in this shadowy world of politics and economics that we don't always see, and we don't have a lot of control over it.
Exactly. And it makes you think about our responsibility as users, right? What does it even mean to be a good digital citizen? And then there's the whole issue of transparency and accountability. We need more of that from both the companies that make these platforms and the governments that are trying to regulate them.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the potential solutions that are being tossed around. So ByteDance doesn't want to sell TikTok, but we've got those investors waiting in the wings, ready to pounce if they change their mind. Big names like Stephen Mnuchin and Frank McCourt. But then there's that wild card bid from Perplexity AI. What do you make of that?
It's definitely a curveball. On the one hand, merging with an AI company like Perplexity, it could address some of those national security concerns. Maybe you take control of the algorithm and all that data away from ByteDance and put it with a U.S. company. That could calm some fears about China having access.
Yeah, I can see that. But wouldn't that just create a whole new set of problems? I mean, we'd be talking about an AI running a platform used by millions of people every day. That's kind of a scary thought, isn't it?
It is. You hit the nail on the head. It might check some boxes when it comes to national security, but then you open up this whole other Pandora's box. What happens when an AI is making choices about what we see, how our data gets used, how the whole platform evolves? We haven't even begun to figure that out as a society.
So maybe we're just swapping one problem for another, huh? We get rid of worries about China, but then we have to worry about this AI calling the shots.
Exactly. And that just shows how complicated this whole thing is. There's not going to be one simple solution that fixes everything. We're dealing with competing values, with politics, with economics, with technology that changes faster than we can keep up with. It's a mess.
It really is. So if selling TikTok, whether it's to investors or through this merger with Perplexity, isn't the perfect answer, what other options do we have?
Well, that's where the government has to step in. right? This whole TikTok mess has reignited this debate about how to regulate social media. How do we find a balance between keeping the country safe, protecting free speech, and dealing with the immense power of these tech companies? It's a tough question.
No kidding. So we've got some lawmakers saying we need tougher data privacy laws, right? And not just for TikTok, but for all social media companies. Does that seem like a good path forward?
It's definitely one approach. The idea is to have clear rules about what data companies can collect, how they can use it, who has access to it, make everything transparent.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. And there's also been talk about creating a whole new agency to oversee these social media companies, right?
Right. Some people think that's the way to go. This new agency could monitor data practices, investigate any potential breaches, and make sure companies are actually following the rules. It's like we need someone to watch the watchers, make sure they're playing fair.
It does feel like we're in uncharted territory here. It's like the digital world is evolving so fast that our laws and regulations just can't keep up. It's like trying to hit a moving target.
You nailed it. The old ways we use to regulate things, like for traditional industries, they just might not work for social media. It's too new, too fast-moving, too different. We need fresh ideas, new approaches.
And it's easy to get lost in all the legal stuff and the corporate maneuvering, but we have to remember that real people are going to be impacted by whatever happens with TikTok, right? There are millions of people who use it, and their lives could change drastically depending on what decisions get made.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We can't lose sight of the human element here. It's not just about abstract legal principles or some CEO's bottom line. We're talking about real people's livelihoods, their creative outlets, the communities they've built online, their sense of connection. These are real things, and they matter.
It's easy to forget about all that when you're talking about these big, powerful companies and governments making decisions. And we also have to remember that what happens with TikTok could have repercussions beyond TikTok itself, right? It could change how governments approach regulating all social media platforms, not just this one.
Right. It sets a precedent. What happens here with TikTok could impact Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of them. It raises these huge questions about how much power government should have over the internet, about freedom of expression online, about data privacy in the digital age. This is bigger than just TikTok.
It really is. And as we're having this conversation, I keep coming back to data. It seems like it's at the heart of so many of the concerns surrounding TikTok. It feels like we're just starting to understand how important data privacy and security are going to be in the future.
That's a really important point. We're in the middle of this massive data revolution, and we're still writing the rules.
Yeah.
We can't think about data the same way we used to. It's not just information anymore. It's connected to power, to our identities, even to national security. It's a whole new ballgame.
So how do we even begin to deal with all that? How do we protect ourselves? How do we make smart choices about the platforms we use? It feels so overwhelming.
Yeah, those are big questions, and they're worth exploring. But I think it's important to acknowledge that this whole situation with TikTok is still unfolding. There's a lot we don't know, and things could change quickly.
For sure. We're all on the edge of our seats waiting to see what President-elect Trump decides to do when he takes office on Monday. Will he try to force a sale? Will he negotiate more time? Will he come up with something totally unexpected? Whatever happens, it's going to be a pivotal moment for TikTok and maybe even for the future of the internet.
It definitely will be. And as this story continues to unfold, it's crucial for all of us to stay informed, to ask critical questions, and to be a part of the conversation about what we want the digital world to look like.
Before we start digging into all the potential solutions people have been talking about, I'd love to hear some of your initial reactions to everything we've learned. Like, what are some of the things that really stood out to you?
It feels like we've just dipped our toes in the water. There's so much more to unpack here.
There really is. The whole TikTok thing, it's like holding up a mirror to all the big challenges we're facing in this tech-driven, data-obsessed world, Privacy, security, freedom. Who has the power? It's all tangled up together.
It really is. And you mentioned earlier this idea of digital citizenship. I think that's a concept we need to explore a bit more. What does it even mean to be a responsible citizen in this digital age?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's not something we talk about enough,
Right. It's about recognizing that what we do online, it has consequences for ourselves, for other people. It's about thinking about the data we share, the stuff we read and watch, the things we post, the platforms we use. All of that has an impact on our privacy, on our security, even on our democracy.
So it's not just about being smart about how we use technology. It's about being active participants in shaping the digital world, right?
Exactly. We can't just blindly click agree on every website and app,
Yeah.
We have to start asking questions. Who's collecting our data? What are they doing with it? What are the risks? We need to be more critical about what we see online. And we have to hold these companies and our governments accountable.
It's a call to action, isn't it? Like, we're not just passive passengers in this whole digital revolution. We have to be drivers, right? We have to take the wheel.
We do. And it starts with education.
Yeah.
We have to arm ourselves with knowledge, with the tools to navigate all of this. Understanding data privacy, cybersecurity, knowing how algorithms and AI are shaping what we see, it's all important now.
It's a lot to learn, I know, but it does feel empowering to realize that we're not just helpless bystanders. We can actually do something.
Absolutely. We have power. We have a voice. And the more we know, the more we get involved, the better chance we have of creating a digital world that reflects our values.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much. We've talked about the TikTok ban, the worries about data privacy, the potential solutions people are talking about, and what all of this means for the future of social media and how we live online.
It's been a great conversation. I hope it's made our listener think about some of these issues in new ways.
We've covered a lot of ground, but like you said earlier, this story is far from over. It'll be interesting to see what happens next, right?
Definitely. Keep an eye on TikTok, but also pay attention to what's happening with data and technology in general. Think about the information you share online, the platforms you use, how all of this impacts your life. Ask questions, stay informed, and most importantly, get involved. Make your voice heard.
Those are wise words. Well, thanks for joining me on this deep dive. We'll be back soon with another exciting topic to explore. Until then, stay curious and keep learning.